6:30, and we will open it with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could stand and join us, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So tonight we have a continuance of our water sewer rate hearing. And that hearing is actually going to be continued again until next Monday. What time, Kevin?
6 p.m.
Next
6:30 p.m.
Next Monday at 6:30. So if anybody that's here specifically for the water sewer rate hearing, we're moving that out because Selectman Donovan wanted to be here for that, so we pushed it out a week because he's unable to be here this evening. So other than that, our next item on the agenda is public comments. So if we have any public comments this evening, this would be the time for them. Yes, sir.
Chris Howell, Concord Street. I was just wondering if somebody could talk about the proposed development on Parker Street on the Acton Town line and what's going on with that, and if there's anything that the town is doing with that.
As of right now, we have no agreements on anything. I know there's been a lot of chatter about sewer, there's been a lot of noise about a lot of different things in town, but as of now, town of Maynard and the developer, his representative, have agreed on nothing. At this point, all that's happened so far is he has, at his expense, done traffic studies, water and sewer studies as far as the quality and the sustainability of the infrastructure on that side of Maynard. He's done those. He's done provided a study of schools, some stuff for the schools, and he's, those three, what's the other one? Traffic, schools, water and sewer, and he has suggested to us at a time when it's appropriate what type of, mitigations he'd be willing to provide for the things that would be needed to, if it gets to that point. But as of right now, it's purely discussion, and as a matter of fact, there is no proposal on the table. So far, they came and made a presentation on April 18th, which we all saw and several people in the community saw, and one of the comments made was that we had agreed, or someone in Maynard had agreed to provide sewer service to the town of Acton and the residents that would be living in Acton at that facility. That has not been agreed to. It's been discussed, but nothing has been agreed to yet. And there's nothing else I can tell you. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, Connie Scribner, Deerridge. I just wanted to confirm that what had been the wine store is going to be a marijuana dispensary.
I do not know. That is not in Maynard. It's outside of our jurisdiction. But that is the rumor.
Oh, it's not? Yeah, I just...
That's the rumor, but that's not anything to do with the town of Maynard. That's Acton property.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I saw in the minutes from the Acton Selectmen's meeting that they had set up a subcommittee meeting with the developer. Is there any communication between the two towns that's going on?
I have not been contacted about Acton, from anyone in Acton, and the developer has not invited us to any such of a meeting. So far, we've had 4 or 5 meetings with the developer. Melissa, myself, Kevin, and Bill Nemzer have been the people that have attended all the meetings. We've had the Maynard Police Chief come in and discuss, police calls and how those would be handled in that area. The Maynard Fire Chief has come in and discussed the effect on the fire department if such a development was to be in place. And we had Aaron McCloskey come in from the DPW to one of those meetings to discuss water and sewer and, what the town's take on water and sewer is. But as far as decisions being made, we haven't made none.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And, there will be, from the developer within the next several weeks, probably within the next month, he will have information sessions at the, I believe they'll be at the library if he can get the room. And he will invite, everybody that would like to attend. And, those will be open to the public, obviously. So he will schedule those in the coming month. And, questions more specific to the project itself that he's going to propose when he does propose it, he can answer then. At least Melissa and I will be there, is because we've been, discussing things with him in a broad scope. We would come just to kind of, answer any questions from the town side if they're asked. But there will be public information sessions. But other than that, it's just been, very broad discussions about a number of topics that would surround such a thing, but there has been no agreement on any item at all.
I don't think this board, just to add to that, would make any decisions without taking input from the town on any level and go forward. I don't know what sparked these rumors, 4 or 5 months after a public presentation and where the misinformation came from, but we all strongly believe that the town should have an input on this, and we'd hold a public hearing or put it on the agenda when the time comes before we move forward.
Anyone else have any questions? Where is Vic? You didn't pick him up on the way?
He was in the ward at the DPW when I came up.
Okay,
It takes him a while.
all right. We need to get an elevator. But anyway, so are there any more public comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Have we answered your questions appropriately? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yep, you're welcome. Acceptance of minutes, we have one set of minutes to accept this evening. They are the meeting of October 17th, 2017, and the motion is that we move to accept and approve the meeting minutes of October 17th, 2017 as shown. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay. Any discussion about those particular minutes? All those in favor of acceptance? Thank you. Okay, item number 3 is the correspondence items. Tonight, they are A through M, looks like. So we have A through M, yeah. A through M, it looks like most of them are kind of repetitive annual type of things, with the exception of the DOT Great Road Bridge Inspection Report. Does anybody have any question on any of those items?
Just to share with the board, I had a chance to discuss that with Wayne earlier today, because that just wasn't exactly clear to me, kind of what all the findings were from that. And so just to kind of share more broadly, Kevin, I don't know what the plan is for next steps on that, but will it probably get turned over to Wayne to serve as like the primary point of contact?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
through Aaron, but typically Wayne does handle those on our
Okay.
behalf.
And so one of the things that he did mention was that we had applied at some point for a MassWorks grant, actually
did.
for that specific bridge. We haven't heard yet, which is probably not the best sign in the world, but at least it's definitely kind of reiterates that it's on the radar of DPW.
Yeah, it wasn't a MassWorks grant, but a similar
Okay.
grant for bridge repairs, and yeah, that's exactly
Cool.
correct.
And then I'd also raised with him correspondence B, which is that CME, Early Environmental Coordination for the Florida Road Project, just because I was kind of curious about the contractor's reference to potential easements and acquisitions, given the tight geographical space, which obviously kind of raised a little flag for me. So he kind of mentioned, no, it's typical, yeah, it is a tight space, and again, as this one goes forward, I think it's not slated until like a 2020 project or something like
2020,
that. Yeah. But that he'll work with them to kind of see if we can navigate through that, given the location of the buildings vis-a-vis the road and the width of the bridge. That was all that I had.
Later. Okay, so the motion for the correspondence items is move to accept and approve the correspondence items A through M as shown.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any more discussion about any of the items in the correspondence tonight? All those in favor of accepting? Thank you very much. All right, we're going to skip this time to the first public hearing we have scheduled for 6:40. And by the time I'm done reading the legal notice, it'll be 6:40. All right, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so, notice, the legal notice reads, notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 138, as amended, that a public hearing will be held on November 7th, 2017, at 6:40 PM in room 201 of the Maynard Town Building on the application for transfer of wine and malt license as a package store, wine and malt for Maynard Corner Store LLC, doing business as Maynard Corner Store, 49 Walnut Street, Maynard, Mass. And a copy of the application is on file in the office of the Selectmen. So, the motion is moved to accept and approve the application for liquor license, transfer malt and wine retail Maynard Corner Store, LLC, doing business as Maynard Corner Store, 49 Walnut Street, Maynard, Mass., with the manager of Murgesh Patel. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to pronounce it wrong.
No, very close.
Okay, so we close? Okay.
Very close.
Next time I come to the store, you can tell me how to do it right.
Most welcome.
Okay, Mosbuck?
Most welcome.
Well, okay, all right, so, it's open, so, the floor is yours. You just want to just tell us what you guys are actually doing, and then if anyone has any questions, we'll ask the questions, and then we'll proceed to vote at the end of the questions and discussion.
Okay.
So if you don't mind if I start?
No, that's fine, yeah?
I'm attorney Edmund Hurley, and it's been an honor to represent Mr. Murgesh Patel and his three other partners in this new business. Although it is a new business, it plans to continue along the lines of the existing business, and we're honored to have here with us the seller, Mr. Arvind Patel, who has been cooperating and training Murgesh Patel, who has substantial experience but is learning more. Murgesh has already signed up to take the specific beverage alcohol training class on November 14th, and he's already familiar with a lot of the details of the operation of the store, and specifically relative to the license and alcohol. So he's aware of things like the timing of when the alcohol can be sold, and also things like the just looking up IDs and using the software that enables him to ensure that even an out-of-state ID or wherever, even out of country, is for a legitimate buyer. And so he looks forward to continuing to work. Murgesh will work approximately 40 hours each week, and Arvind Patel has agreed to continue to train him even after the actual transfer takes place. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So the class that you mentioned, that's the TIPS class?
Yeah.
Oh, kind of commonly known as the TIPS class?
Yeah.
And that's November 14th?
Yeah.
Right, that's in Tewksbury,
Okay.
and if I recall, although some of the classes are online, this one is in person, which I think facilitates the learning and enables people to ask questions and to talk about their experience.
Okay, so everyone that's there will be tip certified? All the employees will all the employees be
Yes.
tip certified? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for this gentleman?
Quick question. What attracted you to Maynard and this particular business?
Sorry, sir.
What was it that attracted you to Maynard and this particular business?
Actually, attracting, it's a nice neighborhood, and the town very quiet to any other town. So, and Arvind is also the good the seller, and he's doing good business over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we just happy to see that around here, and then we talk about the business to selling, and he's agreed to sell. That's why.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
You guys relatives?
Not relative, but long family.
Okay, okay.
Murgesh lives in Lowell,
Lowell.
so he'll be up so early he won't hit much traffic.
So I have to come down here and to find something for living.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have any questions for the gentleman? No? Straightforward. All right. So, we read the motion. We had a second on the motion?
It is a public hearing, so there should allow
Yeah.
public opportunity to ask
Does anybody, I guess, does anybody in the audience have any questions they'd like asked? Comments, questions? Okay. So do we have a second, Becky?
I don't have a
I'll second it.
Okay, I read the motion, but, okay. All right, so if there is no more comments or questions, we'll vote. So all those in favor of the transfer of this license? Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you,
luck.
sir.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, all of you. And
Thank
most
you very
welcome for everybody.
And now,
I can do my best for it.
at 6:45, we will close the public hearing.
Thank you, Attorney
I will
Miller.
get
Thank
this mailed to the ABCC tomorrow.
Thank you.
I should hear within the next 3 weeks.
I guess the licenses.
There should be 2 licenses in there for you
Yeah.
to sign.
Take care.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Arvin.
Have a good night.
Good night.
All right, the consent agenda is next. Items A through E. And then make a motion to accept the consent agenda items A through E as shown.
Second.
Anybody have any questions about the 5 consent agenda items? Those are the same hours of the last couple of years, the last few years for Christmas parking and everything?
Yes.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions about the 5 consent agendas? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. So the next hearing is at 7:05. Skip it. Okay, we're going to, item number 7 is a common victual license and entertainment license for the Boston Bean House, 102 Main Street. And it's a, the motion is move to approve the common victual and entertainment application for SRJ Investment Company, doing business as Boston Bean House at 102 Main Street, Maynard, Mass, as shown. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Is there anybody here representing Boston Bean House?
No, he had to go back to Texas. I apologize on his behalf.
Becky, I had one question about
Okay.
the application. Just, I was curious about the difference in the hours on it. So for the victualler license, it's listed from 6:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then, but the entertainment license goes from 6:30 a.m. till 10 p.m. So I'm just kind of, that just kind of like, how does that work? They wouldn't be able to sell coffee or sandwiches after
No,
4 p.m.?
They actually do want to stay open on both sides until 10 p.m. They want to have a dinner hour now.
Okay.
The new
So
one.
do they need, so do we need to amend the hours then on the victualler piece?
Yeah, the license doesn't state the hours. It was just in the application, so I've just marked it.
Okay, so the
Thank you.
intent is to extend fully the hours out to 10 o'clock p.m. Okay.
Do we have to vote to adjust that or no?
It's gonna have dinner.
He's going to have dinner.
I don't know. Do you know, Chris just asked if we have to change to
Oh,
vote to
Will
make
we
that
have,
change.
will we have to vote to change the hours at some point? Is that just,
No, I mean, if you approve the license, essentially, they note, because there's a window that they're allowed to operate,
yeah,
and they just amend the application. But the license itself that's issued is
okay.
silent to the hours.
You know, everything else is in order as far as the town's concerned?
Yeah.
Any idea when this sale is intended to take place?
It's taking place pretty soon because the 3 parties all agreed that the landlord has agreed to compromise on the rent, and the seller is very happy to be able to at least now get it sold and.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is I would much prefer, especially when there's a transfer, when a new owner, to have somebody here, and it's a little unusual not to, on a business like this, so that we can get an idea of who it is we're dealing with and, ask questions of
We don't
them.
have a liquor license, do we?
No, there is no liquor license.
No, I realize that. But I don't want to hold up the sale of the business.
he has family in Houston area and needed to get back down there for a couple of things that were.
So it's supposed to have happened a few months ago, but because of the hurricane issues.
Well, we can always invite him back in after we if we approve, we could always invite him back in to just, give us the story. If that's, especially with no liquor license, it's just a continuation of an ongoing business. Okay. This is really no one to ask any questions of. Can you have him just come to our next meeting? Just introduce himself and we'll just go through that.
Perfect.
And if anybody wants to ask him any questions at that point.
At least assuming he's gonna be in town. I don't wanna drag him up from Houston for.
Hey, listen, a cup of coffee, he can come in. All right, so I guess, the motion was seconded. All those in favor? Thank you, and he'll come in and will satisfy everything. Kevin, we're just gonna skip around and kill some time until we have the public hearing.
Yeah, I
Which
think
is
we
just
could-
gonna get pushed off anyways, but I didn't wanna get in the middle of something and then,
Correct.
well,
What do you got?
actually, we're just gonna continue it anyway, so it really doesn't matter, we can go in order.
We could do a couple interviews.
Yeah, so we have some board interviews this evening, and the first one is Conservation Commission, with an interview with Andrew Snyder. And we have a motion before us, a move to accept and approve Andrew Snyder to the Conservation Commission with a term. It expires June 30th, 2018. Good evening.
Good evening.
We had a, let's see.
Do you want Andrew to slip back?
Hmm?
Do you need to slip back?
No, we had a, what was it?
He submitted, as part of the packet, you'll
Yeah,
see his
but
submitted
Who was
letter.
the gentleman that sent us an email today?
Oh, that was for the cultural,
Cultural Council.
yeah.
Oh,
No, I sent an email today for the Master Plan Steering Committee. I'm very interested in that as well.
Yeah, no, but I
Okay,
think,
all right.
Jeff.
yeah, no, for
Yeah,
that, but,
okay.
it's Michelle, right? The-
Michelle,
well,
yeah.
I thought she was gonna be here, because I had a chance to talk to her earlier, just
Right.
because I'd mentioned that sometimes it's helpful for us as the board to know that, the committee in question, regardless of the committee, is supporting the applications that are coming forward. So I had a chance to chat with her earlier, and I know she had mentioned that the interview process and that they were excited to welcome Andrew on board. So,
that's nice.
again, I thought she was going to be here in person, but she may have gotten caught up on something else or thought we were starting later.
And I don't think that Andrew will be a problem. I've had an opportunity to meet with and speak with Andrew on a number of occasions on different issues, and I certainly think that he's well qualified and a good spot for it.
Oh, thank you.
Excuse me, the conservation officer is unable to be here at the moment, but I was asked to relay that message and just really support the recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So what drew you to joining to join this commission?
It really goes back to my mother, actually. She was on a very similar commission in Concord while I was growing up. And I've always been kind of interested in the confluence of environmentalism and development, and how it can easily swing too far in one direction, total development, too far in the other direction, no development at all. I'm also interested in restoration. Perhaps there are areas in Maynard which were once what might be considered, untouched, and that could be that way again if it doesn't interfere with anything else. It's just two subjects which have always interested me, is planning and also environmentalism. I could go on about my love for nature. I don't know if that's really required. But I also think that Maynard perhaps, I know that the DPW has been heavily involved in making Maynard a green community. What I don't see is a lot of publicity on the subject compared with other towns, say Acton, Concord, Sudbury, and towns around here. They all seem to have very active web pages, for example, and Maynard does not. It doesn't. That's something I'd very much like to promote. That's about it.
Thank you.
No, thanks for stepping up, Andrew. I
Oh.
think you'll be great in this role, and it's nice to have you more involved. and-
Great, thank you.
All right, we second that motion? We did second it, didn't we?
Well, I'll second it if it hasn't been seconded.
All right, so all those in favor of, thank you very much for volunteering.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll be in touch with Michelle about future steps. Is that
I think
the
you'll have to,
procedure?
but yeah, and she'll have to
Your
sign
appointments
something to be
will
sworn
in
in.
the town clerk's office tomorrow. This is
Okay.
starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. so-
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have fun.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We have a second Conservation Commission. It's Karen O'Reilly.
Hello.
So, all right, I'm gonna read the motion and then move to accept and approve Karen O'Reilly to the Conservation Commission with a term expiring June 30th, 2020. Do we have a second?
I'll second. We'll fight for it. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay,
We're gonna get
All
it
right.
right this time.
so we have all your information and we've had it for a couple of days, a few days, so does anyone have any questions for Karen about the, her desire to be on the Conservation Commission?
I think your letter sort of explained your rationale, and your resume. It all also shows your background. Have you attended any of the Maynard Conservation meetings?
I have not, no. I've attended conservation meetings in the town which I grew up and work in currently, so I'm somewhat familiar of the process.
Mhm.
I'm relatively new to Maynard,
Oh,
less than 5 years now, so I thought I'd try to get active in my new hometown as well.
That's great.
We're glad you did.
How's the commute to the University of Florida?
It's actually a relatively new online program. It's a collaboration between the University of Florida and the ASPCA. So classes are online, and it's a great program,
Very cool.
geared towards people who are working full-time in the field, veterinarians, law enforcement.
Not that it has anything to do with it, but how many animal control officers do you have in Watertown?
One,
It's one?
just me. Yeah, it's,
Busy time of year.
it is, spring and fall. So,
And the holiday belt.
Okay.
No, as everyone said, thank you so much for stepping up and wanting to get involved more actively with the town. It's great to have you coming
Thank
on
you.
board, and having had the familiarity of how these work in other towns will be a great perspective, I think, as well.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, David, any questions? Anyone
No.
else? Okay, so all those in favor of Karen O'Reilly? Appointment, thank you very much, good luck.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it.
Town clerk, You'll need to stop by and be sworn in anytime after 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So pick your day.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen.
Good evening, Vic.
Brad,
I said
Matt?
good evening.
What?
I said good evening. You weren't here before. I wanted to say hi.
Hey, listen, I have to run a business, you know.
I know the feeling.
I'm not getting any brick in my taxes either, by the way.
Neither am I. All right, so,
Oh, how are you?
all right, we have two appointments, volunteers for the Cultural Council. The first one is Brad Matthews, and it's, the motion is moved to accept and approve Brad Matthews to the Cultural Council with a term expiring June 30th, 2019. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay.
And this is the one for which we got the email from Jeff.
And Jeff is also here in the audience.
Hey, Jeff?
How we doing?
Very well.
Good. So, how many members do we have on the Cultural Council, Jeff?
5 right now, out of a 7-person body.
So it's a 7-person body and there's only 5?
That's not including
Not including
Andy
these
and
two,
Brad? Okay.
correct.
Not including,
Not
there's
including
5
these-
not including these?
These 2 appointments would bring us up to the full quorum of 7.
Okay, and then, was it, we've got a lot of emails this week.
Gail,
On a
Stephanie.
variety of issues. You're also looking to add a couple like alternates too?
Yes, we raised that
Okay.
possibility.
All right, so, I mean, I don't, there's no problem with that, is there, after we're done with this?
The town clerk is looking into the legalities
Okay.
of that right now for us, and she'll get back
Okay.
to us.
All right. Okay, so, does anybody have any questions for Brad? I mean, we got the emails and we got the other stuff that are pretty self-explanatory as to.
Brad, what do you vision for the Cultural Council and I guess I can ask this of both of you, and the, the future of the district as far as the cultural district? What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that the thing that brought me to Maynard, I just moved here back June 1, and the thing that brought me to Maynard was in fact the culture of Maynard. And that meant both the arts and the side, that because I happen to be an avocational artist, and the theater, but it was also the heart of the people, just walking around and talking to people on the street and in the stores and the like. It was the feeling of the place. So when I think of culture, I think of culture is the culture of the town, the way the people in the town interact, where they come together. It's the arts and all those kinds of things, but it's also the restaurants, it's the meeting places, it's the way that the town is, what makes Maynard Maynard, as opposed to just a place. So the Cultural Council, and for that matter, the Cultural District, really have an opportunity to showcase what's already in existence, to be an advocate for it and an encourager of it. And then beyond that, to be doing things that inspire individuals and town groups and companies and the like to figure out how to play together that much more and bring that much more value all the way from the kids to the elderly, all of the entire group, and be able to that much more give Maynard a visibility in the broader community, so that people here really get that much more of a chance to enjoy it, but also that we bring more people in and more business in to the community as well. Because same thing that got me here is what we want to be able to do to bring other people to the community.
Brad, you were living in Norway, correct?
I was
before you
living in
moved
Norway
here?
for the 6 years before, yes.
So had you heard of Maynard, or was that through art channels that you
A
became familiar with it?
gazillion years ago, I actually worked for DEC out of Bedford. And I was actually in the Boston area up until for about 15 years, up till '86, and then I moved to the West Coast. And 6 years ago, I moved from the West Coast to Norway, and now back to the States, and I had to figure out where I wanted to go. And I had friends and connections in the Boston area, and then it was a question of where in the Boston area. And I did a lot of sort of researching, trying to get a feel, and a friend of mine had mentioned, you ought to go check out Maynard, and it was like, oh, Tech used to have their headquarters there. I should go out and take a look. And I drove into town in my newly leased plug-in hybrid, and I saw the movie theater, and I was like, it's got a downtown movie theater. And I thought, I'll park the car. And as I'm pulling into the parking lot, I see that there's a plug-in for a plug-in hybrid. I was like, oh, this has got to be, kismet in some sense. And then I got out and I was walking around and I just started talking to people in the shops and along the thing, and everybody was friendly. And then they told me about art space, and then there was the galleries and even a Tai Chi place, because I've been looking forward to Tai Chi. So it was like there was some sense of connection coming together.
Can you hold on for 1 second? I don't mean to interrupt you, and I'll let you finish in a second, but it's 7:05, so I have
Sure.
to open our continued hearing, water and sewer rate hearing at 7:05. I'm going to continue it to the 13th at 6:30 PM, and I'm going to close it now.
So we're not going to close it, but
But
continue.
yeah, we're going to continue, we're going to continue this hearing until Monday, November 13th at 6:30 PM.
And Kevin, just a quick question on that. You've got, I know a lot of us had questions for Doug coming out of the first hearing and followed up with you separately. So when we reconvene the meeting on the 13th, we should be prepped for those? Okay, great.
Yeah, as of now, I know he's prepared, I think, the original proposal plus 2 others.
Okay.
To kind of address some of the concerns that were raised by the board.
Perfect. And I know there were some questions as well around like indirect costs and how those were accounted for as well. So I don't know if Aaron's kind of been thinking through that piece of it, but
Okay.
cool, thank you.
All right, so, anything else? So I move to
No,
continue
thanks
this,
for picking me.
I move to continue the hearing until Monday, November 13th at 6:30 PM. Do you have a second?
Thank you.
All those in agreement? Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We're
And
talking
you can
about
just say ditto.
Norway, electric cars, yeah. I can't
Except for the
believe-
Norway part.
Right?
Then we'll get suspicious.
I have no idea how you're not on the cultural council already, Andy, but
Yeah, seriously.
I'm not gonna go there.
I avoid responsibility.
I don't know.
I think
You've been hiding behind the statue for, you're hiding behind Cinderella.
Our house is literally a
So,
gallery.
anyways,
Yeah.
no, we, for the people in the conservation and all of our, we have openings in so many different committees right now that, anytime someone comes, we do appreciate it very much. And we do have to vote, so, unless anybody has any further questions for Brad, we'll vote and see where it goes. So all those in favor? Thank you very much for volunteering again.
Thank
We
you.
do appreciate it, and the town
Welcome to
appreciates it.
Maynard, too.
Help us maintain our cultural designation.
Clerk's office tomorrow morning, and you can stop by her office anytime
Andy's
sworn in.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, we have to do him separately. So now, Andy, we're on to you, and we have to move to accept and approve. Andy Moreland, right?
More line.
Moreline?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Moreline.
No.
I did better with the other name than yours, sorry. All right, so move to accept and approve Andy Moreline to the Cultural Council with a term expiring June 30th, 2020. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Yeah, you've escaped pretty well, Andy, so good job there, but
I
now
sniffed
we
deeply.
have you, and, I think everybody, pretty much everyone here should be familiar with Andy by now, but if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to ask.
Well, how did we finally catch you? Or how did they finally catch you?
Oh, I'm just really ambitious for this town. I mean, if I'm gonna live here, I want it to be the best place it can. And I think that we've got those empty buildings over there that still aren't full yet. And I think that people are gonna come here, they're gonna be young, they're gonna want a place to live, they're gonna wanna be able to go, this is the coolest place in the world. I want this job so bad. And we're gonna bring businesses in because of the culture that's attached to Maynard. I really think that is, I'm totally convinced that is the most vital part of having open 24-hour or 11 or 12 o'clock coffee shops, 3 of them downtown. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 3 coffee shops open until 11 o'clock at night. Knock my socks off. A little tiny speck of a place. It's just plain cool to be there, and people go out of their way to live there. We want Maynard like that.
Thank
I hope your energy is contagious.
Yes, I am. I can tell you, when you come through town at 11 o'clock at night, you don't see many lights on, so. I hope the coffee shop's a big draw, but, certainly, most of us are familiar with, your work and everything, so, we appreciate you volunteering to be a part of this, and, I know you were part of, some of the other stuff prior to getting the cultural district, designation, so we appreciate that as well. So if anyone doesn't have any questions, we'll vote to accept Andy's volunteerism onto the Cultural Council. So all those in favor? Again, thank you both very much, and we appreciate it. And
Ditto, your
we
records
appreciate
will
the,
be in the town clerk's
energy.
office tomorrow.
As soon as I can get to it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you both.
Thank you for stepping up as chair, Jeff.
So Jeff, we'll get back to Jeff
Yeah,
about
we'll-
the other stuff,
We'll
As
confirm.
soon as we hear from.
about an alternate or two, whatever, however that works.
All right, thank you
I
very
don't
much.
know,
Thanks, good
can they
seeing you.
usually vote? They usually can't vote, can they, alternates?
To add,
No,
It's not
no,
in-
but
it's not in the
usually
charter, so
usually
it'd be-
alternates don't get to vote, but since it's not in the charter,
Don't
I
they
think
vote?
the idea was to have them vote in the event that one of the counselors couldn't make it, to make it easier to to make sure we had a quorum for our meetings. That was one of several reasons.
Doesn't planning board do that?
Okay.
Yeah, it may be required eventually that if that's the way they want to go, that it actually gets a charter change done, that,
That's what I think we wanted to look into, so.
Okay. We'll get back.
Okay, appreciate that,
Thank you very much. All right, Kevin, number 9 is all you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 9 is the ratification of the NEPA Locals 54 and 55, the New England Police Benevolent Association, therefore the police collective bargaining unit. Locals 54 and 55, as the board is aware, is both superior and a patrolman. They choose to negotiate together, and that's how they have it. That's why there's both a local 54 and a local 55 that represents both the superiors, which is the sergeant and lieutenant, as well as the patrolman. The process for negotiation started in late winter, around February timeframe kickoff, which is common as the June 30th timeframe on the expiration of the agreements. The agreement before you, as we've discussed in executive sessions before you for approval and vote this evening, is a 3-year agreement effective July 1st of 17 through June 30th of 20. Couple of the highlights that we've discussed are agreed upon reduction in stipend for the traffic, what they refer to as a special officer, which is equivalent to 15.36% above the top step patrolman's rate. And then the discussion about when the current employee assigned to the position is no longer serving as a special services officer, the rate of compensation will be equal to the detective pay, and specific job responsibilities will be assigned by the chief of police. Right now, that special officer is Carl Nyholm, who does the traffic and meter issues downtown during the day, but this will provide in future planning, as Carl will be retiring at some point, possibly in this during this duration, maybe not, but the intent here was for us to have the ability for when that position does vacate to rethink that job duty, whether or not we actually want to have a uniformed officer doing meter duties, et cetera, as well as the reduction to provide for that special officer rate to be equivalent to the detective rate, which is a lower percentage rate. The detective receives 10% above the step that he occupies instead of the 15.36%. That special officer will also receive the 10% above the step that they currently occupy. The other piece that was added to this is the accreditation officer receiving a $3,000 annual stipend. As you know, the accreditation process is a extensive process that is done throughout the year. This currently is something that is actually to the benefit of the town. It's quantified now, with a set stipend amount. Currently, the way that works now is that the performance of doing that work is oftentimes outside of the normal 40-hour week, and is compensated at an overtime rate anyway. So the $3,000 essence, 3,000 plus or minus, has been north of 3,000 actually, has been part of that overtime pay. So essentially on the budget side of things, it works out. The other thing is a field training officer stipend, which will receive 1 hour of overtime per field training officer shift worked. It's current practice and has been. The current practice is just now codified within the agreement. But we have had, certainly in the last few years, as we've seen hiring of new, younger officers that have come on, the importance of that field training officer position and the duties that they provide have been really utilized in the last 5 years. Other than that, a lot of it was language items. Essentially the COLA steps that were agreed to we're in the 2, and 1.75% over fiscal 17, 18, and 19. Roughly essentially about a 7.5% total contractual cost of living increase, which is certainly within the norm. Any questions? It's like I said, a lot of what we've been talking about over the last several months. I think it's a good agreement for the town and for the union. We've gone back and forth. Obviously, it's been many months of negotiating, and several items that they've requested, and as of the town, and we've come to an agreement.
As you mentioned, Kevin, so this tracks with the version that we last reviewed in
Yes.
executive session, so.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so there's a motion attached to it, and it's a move to accept and approve the NEPBA Locals 54-55 agreement with a term of July 1st, 2017 through June 20th, 2020. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. June 30th, 2020. What did I say?
I'll re-second it.
June 30th, 2020. Sorry.
It's a little twos in there.
Yeah. Any other questions about this one? I mean, we have seen it and we've gone through it, so. All those in favor of acceptance?
Thank you.
These are the ones, just actual copies.
Yeah, those are the actual originals.
Okay. All right, so Kevin, want to just walk us through the
Sure.
ambulance fee issue?
The ambulance notice for action, as it's highlighted, it was a notice from the Mass Municipal Association, the state association that represents cities and towns in the Commonwealth. Selectman Gavin and I don't know if other members received it directly, but prior to that conversation, I had a conversation with the fire chief about this impact, and subsequently David had also forwarded it and expressed concern, rightfully so. So we put it on the agenda for discussion amongst the board, and potentially moving towards providing a solidified response to help protect those fees. So what you have before you is a spreadsheet breakdown of the potential revenue loss from Maynard that potentially Maynard will realize. Those are real numbers. The numbers in the spreadsheet come directly from Pro Ambulance. Pro Ambulance provides our ALS service as well as our billing service. And then, as you'll note, those numbers certainly would be exacerbated as we see the transition to more transports just from general growth, aging population, et cetera, that I likely will drive up, as well as future developments possibly too, that will drive up more and more of those ambulance transports. The issue is that what's before the Senate is that under the healthcare cost containment legislation, it will actually, it's being proposed that the schedule that is being proposed would actually significantly impact and cap the amount that EMS fees are able to be billed out, which is currently a decision at the local level. So that's where that revenue hit would be, because the cap on what we could actually charge for fees as opposed to what it costs to operate our ambulance and provide those services couldn't be.
So, okay. So this is kind of a look back at what the effect would have been in 2016.
Yeah, because we have a full picture.
Right. When does this vote take place?
It's kind of unclear. They said it hasn't happened yet, but it is expected. They don't give a date on when to. It's kind of just take action as quickly as possible. I think we got it November 1st when we actually received the original notice from the Mass Municipal Association that the Senate would be taking it up at a future. So as soon as possible is kind of where it's at. There's no deadline that has been noted.
Okay.
Gotcha.
that I'm aware of.
So we have a letter to draft or send, or how are we gonna reach out?
Yeah, I
to-
think, administration, we can draft up a letter, it's just, I can get, maybe it come from you, both, probably, both of us could actually, sign it as, from the board and, the town administrator, it's just to, paragraph type of form letter, to send on
okay.
behalf of the town and the board.
And I do think it would be helpful in the letter, I mean, just, for Jamie's benefit, to kind of, just to put it, because, I mean, seeing it from the analysis that,
Localize it.
that it's,
Yeah.
it would result in a 31% loss in revenue, I think it makes it
Significant, yeah.
significant and more real for him,
Yeah.
so.
And, those fees do, I mean, they are used for, true costs that we, whether it's ambulance replacement offsets, it does offset the general fund budget from ambulance receipt transfers that actually help to supplement the expense associated with the, firefighter EMTs salaries that we use for offset on a transfer. It's not the whole thing, but it's a small portion, but as that account becomes less and less, and we have been seeing the impact of that as well, even currently, potentially that, that would impact the amount that we would be able to do a transfer to the general fund as well.
Yeah, I think the more we can give him like solid nuggets of like
Yeah.
real impacts across the budget from the change, the better.
Agreed.
Any idea, and I'm sure you, I didn't speak to Jamie on this, but what the incentive is for the legislature, for the Senate to do this? What's the
I don't know.
benefit?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I
'Cause
didn't get a chance to speak to him yet either, specifically on it.
Somebody buried it in a 132-page bill.
All right, so we're gonna just reach out to him and see what he goes, okay?
Mr. Chairman, if I could add.
Yeah. Go ahead.
David's question, not to interrupt. It reduces the cost of healthcare, therefore, it reduces the cost the state has to pick up for healthcare. So this is typical for me. You reduce healthcare by just reducing what you're willing to pay, not really the cost. I think that's the incentive. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, do you know who sponsored? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Blue Cross is doing it,
Yeah, yeah.
according to what the chief tells me.
They're gonna find somebody,
They're the
they're
primary.
gonna find somebody sympathetic to propose it though, right?
Yeah.
All right, so. So can we find that out too? We just send a letter to that, send a letter to both of them?
Yeah.
To Jamie Eldridge and to whoever it was that, proposed it or sponsored the bill?
Google it,
Attaboy.
Massachusetts S.
Yeah, you're getting better. Google, a couple months ago, you couldn't even turn that thing on. We're flying. All right, so, all right, so
We'll get that in.
We'll send to both of them? Sounds good. Anybody else have any questions or any comments about the robbing of the ambulance fees? All right, so the budget, FY 2019 budget, is this Kevin's or is this from you guys or is this?
I put it on there for both purposes. I didn't know if Cheryl and/or David had any updates that they wanted to provide with regards to the subcommittee, as well as just kind of a general notice and see if the board had any input as I prepare my budget direction or budget message to department heads and the like. That be released about this time next week in accordance with the charter and the budget schedule process. At this point, I did provide, the board has my first revision, revision 1, if you will, that the finance director and I have been discussing on the revenue, anticipated revenue, as I noted in my email to the board. Obviously, this is revision 1, and not as much revisions as there are to expenses, but there'll certainly undoubtedly be several revisions to the revenue as we, more so as the state budget process plays out and potential adjustments there. But as you you'll note in the revenue projection as well as the detail, I think it's in line with the budget process that we've taken for the last several number of years to be somewhat conservative in our projections and potentially revenue estimates that are foreseeable and sustainable. You'll note the revenue projected over FY18 is just about $1 million. That would be available revenue to utilize for FY19 budgets at this point. So, yeah, Mr. Chair, just to kind of talk of that, I don't know if we want to start with maybe getting a sense of where the budget subcommittee left. I think they met last.
I'll make a quick comment. I can tell you that it was a friendly yet spirited meeting.
Sure.
Each party, Mike was there. Thank you for coming and helping us out. And everybody has their own. Nobody's coming from a bad place in reality, but we've got our own perspectives on what things are. And the number that the school told us that they wanted immediately was 9.77% increase to meet their quote-unquote level service budget. We talked quite a bit about that, and there was some discussion. They asked us about, increases in numbers of employees on the town side, and but there's always an understory to what they're saying. For example, well, you added a facilities manager. And I reminded them that the facilities manager that we hired and added was at their request 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And it was discussed that it would be shared 1/3 with the town, 1/3 with the schools, and 1/3 with the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. And I reminded them through a question asking, how many years do you think the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 lasted? The answer being 1. The next year, the town absorbed the 1/3 cost from the schools. So that's just one example, and the conversation was a little bit more heated than that, but it was,
And to that point, that budget was reduced in FY18's budget because of the restructuring of the position, and we actually cut the salary by $12,000. So there's been a reduction from the existing position that's been in place for 5 years.
but I think, in fairness, it's an educational process,
Yeah.
no pun intended, where we're learning about their perspective and they're learning about ours and they're learning about some of the history of where we're at and how we got there. But it's clear that it's a difficult discussion and a difficult situation. And once 9.77% gets heard and you realize, that would leave us 50 cents on the town side if we were to fill their request, it's not sustainable and it can't work. So something has to be done to reassess and review, where they're coming from and where perhaps in some ways where we're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, not to cut you off, David, it's a good point. I mean, you brought it up. It wouldn't even leave us 50 cents. If you just did a back of the envelope 10%, I just gave you what the available revenue is.
I get that.
And I
So
think
we're in the red immediately based on that request.
And I think, and just to clarify, it wasn't a request, it was sort of like, and the purpose of, and I'm even hesitant to kind of get too wrapped around the axle of that particular percentage point, because that is not the intent of the conversations that we're having as a subcommittee. But I think it just kind of underscores the level of kind of realism and level of detail that we're kicking off those conversations with. So, I intended during board comments, but I can just put it in now. I'll have minutes from our public session that we held on October 26th that I'll get to Becky that can be made available, that kind of recaps it. We're working on our second date for that. Originally, we were looking to hold it on December 4th, but I think we might now have a conflict with the FinCom broader meeting that was going to be the 13th being rescheduled to the 4th, so we'll figure all that out. I think what my takeaway from the dialogue was, as it pertains specifically to your question about thinking ahead to the 2019 budget, was we have a lot of conversations with the schools are feeling that they have a lot of and people might debate this, but there's a lot of clarity around their budget and where they're making cuts, and a lot of like open dialogue of, oh, we're cutting this or we're cutting that or we're cutting what have you. I think kind of one of the upshot questions that was put to us to bring back to the board was, is there a way in which in the build-up of the rest of the town's budget, as you're working with department heads in those dialogues, to kind of include in that sort of, okay, what were the asks? If all of the town departments that you're working with in the budget development process are kind of coming to the table saying, oh, here's my, making up numbers, 15%, my desired goal for next year, and lo and behold, it's a 15% increase over what I had last year. Sort of a little bit more kind of description in some ways of what is getting cut off of those asks, or the offsets that other departments are making in their budget. Less, I think, from the perspective of the, while one could look at the question of saying, so the schools feel like everyone's going through that same rigor process too, I think it was as much or more relevant to me was, okay, this will help us perhaps better answer questions that come from the broader town as we head into annual town meeting, to say, look, here's some real solid examples of, it's easy, it might be perhaps for people easier to see the cuts when they look at the school budget because they have that whole entire budget build at that time. But if we're able to also kind of show across the board with the town where trade-offs were made, where offsets were made in order to make different types of investments, and just kind of have something that we're keeping track of throughout the budget build process to help kind of make that piece a little bit more visible to the community about what the level of work that's going into it that they might not see until the February presentation of the budget.
Right. So
would you agree with that?
Yeah, part of the difficulty too is that the schools have, and I don't mean this in a competitive way, but they have an advantage over the town because, the majority of people, if you look at numbers, will have children in the school system. And when you talk about their cuts, quote unquote, and they talk about a guidance counselor, parents and voters that are parents see that and they understand that. You talk about something inside town hall that they don't see.
Yeah, clearly.
That they don't have daily access to during the year. It becomes much more difficult for the town. Whatever it might be.
The day after the snowstorm.
An assistant fire chief, say, what's the need for that? We don't need that. We've never had that before. But that's a cut that's literally been made.
That's a fair point, yeah. I mean, so what I would argue actually the opposite of that, because what we see is only what they're cutting. We don't see the detailed line budget. What we release is a full budget, which provides, if you look at the transparency from 18's budget, it showed that we cut our budget by $900,000 out of the budget. And you can see each individual line items where those happen. And in some cases, there was arguments made for some increases here and there. But at the end of the day, there was $900,000 in needs. Now, you got to prioritize those needs. But they were important needs for a particular department because they wouldn't have asked for it otherwise. And we've made those cuts, and you can see every one of those cuts in the detailed line budget.
And I think it's more, it's less, my sense of it was more, to David's point, that the schools have an easier time of making that kind of real and tactical in a public dialogue, in a way in which looking at numbers on a spreadsheet doesn't resonate as fully, perhaps. So I guess my thought is, if we can keep track of some of those, things you can touch, elements of the budget that are being cut, so that can be part of this ongoing education process across the committees.
Yeah, I mean, the tough part with our budget is there's not a lot of, without having a bigger conversation about impacts and service impacts and what does this mean, there's not a lot of fluff or extra to cut. We've done that. We've gone through that exercise over the last several years. There's not much there. if anything. So then it becomes down to if we're really actually cutting some of those things, what do those impacts translate to?
And I think that's where it kind of pulls us back to what we agreed, like the value of kind of having these different discussions, right? Whether it's the subcommittee format of the
Right.
2 representatives from the 3, or whether it's the broader convening of the FinCom.
Sure.
A term that came up in the course of our session was radical reinvention. And I think it was, to your point, kind of an acknowledgement that we can only count on the revenue that we can count. We can't count on projections and hopes and dreams of a 2020 revenue stream for real planning over the next 3 to 5 years. So then what does that perhaps lead us to? What tough questions do we have to ask as a community in terms of, given natural growth of costs across the board, limited growth of revenue, how do we work through that as a community? And as a community, what are the trade-offs?
Yeah, radical reinvention of the way we deliver services was the actual phrase, but I don't know
what that means.
We don't know what it means, and
Whose phrase was that?
when I pressed for it,
I won't attribute.
when I pressed for
yes,
it, we
but-
really didn't get a response, but I don't think it had to do with the town.
Okay.
So I have a question, because I get, I talk to those folks somewhat, and we love the term structural deficit whenever we're talking about school dollars and school budgets and everything. Can anybody tell us, because I'd be interested to know, what became of the $275,000 for last year? Because I was told over the weekend that the number this year for special ed is ridiculous. Like, and is the 275, did the 275 get paid last year?
So this is timely. I was actually going to mention that tonight. So David mentioned 9.97. I'm not sure if that is even
7.7.
9.77. I'm not sure if that's even.
That was level service, that was
But
there.
so my concern there is that, based on the question I answered today, not knowing whether the 275 from free cash was part of their base, part of their level funded, or if it was outside of that. My response to that was, it was very clear when we went through the process, both from myself and from the board, that it was one-time money, hence free cash, and I was very concerned at the time that it would be, that I really stressed the fact that it wasn't to be added, for future years as a part of the new base.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my concern from the beginning. And I answered that question today. So if they were asking that today, I'm not sure if that number that they're projecting early on is even factoring in that. So the way that money is set up currently is it's sort of
To
like.
answer that, Kevin, I think from what they said, and again, to Cheryl's point, let's not get hung up on the number, but the 9.77 was if the 250 was included. I believe if the 250 wasn't included, the number was 8.44 or 8.4, something like that.
Okay, so to answer
I think Mike
Chris's
might have
question,
something to
it's
say.
essentially set up like an article. So as they have those costs that are associated, the unanticipated, or the costs associated that they know related to special education, I think it was, then those would be charged and processed similar to like an article as an expense item, but they're not added into their actual operating budget.
I understand that, because my question, I asked the question because the board and the plea for the monies at town meeting was very specific. And it was very specific in that we were saying, they came to us very, very much last minute, and so much so that we didn't have time to appropriately, put this out and discuss it with FinCom or anyone else. And we kind of made a last minute decision that this would be a way to go. And we did it based on the fact that those monies, which are $275,000, were to be used to pay the special ed bill that someone dropped on Bob Girardi's desk last, April. Or March or April, and that's what that money was for. I'm just curious if those dollars went to pay that bill or not. That's my question, because if not, then what do we do with it? Why do we give them the $275,000? Because it was very specific as to what that money was for.
The money's earmarked. I don't know if they've charged anything against it.
Haven't charged anything to it yet.
I don't think they have.
It's been earmarked for FY18, still
Same restrictions.
sitting unused.
Okay.
I mean, I have,
They-
How much, can you, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mike, can we find out from somebody on Tiger Drive in the next before our next meeting, how much money they're gonna anticipate turning back to the budget this year? Because they've done it every year. And, you know, what's that amount look like? Or what's that amount gonna look like? 'Cause
Should be zero.
I think
Well,
it's gonna be zero, but.
it hasn't been zero yet since I've been
Should be
sitting up
zero.
here. It has not been zero yet, right?
It hasn't.
I mean, it's been in excess of $100,000 every year. That
Last year
has-
was 13, I think.
Yeah, last year was the first year, it wasn't something crazy, but I'm just wondering if we'll look at the same thing again. But, all right, I was just
They
curious
did,
about
they
that.
did say, and they couldn't get into specifics because of, you know,
Negotiations.
well, no, I'm not talking contract, I'm talking a special ed issue, because of privacy issues, that they know of a student that is going to cost, and I forget the dollar amount, but it was a
Significant.
significant amount. One student that has moved into town that is going to cost them a lot of money for out-of-town services.
Okay.
And so they're already aware of that one, and that's impacting their thought process moving forward as well.
I have a meeting scheduled, I think next week, early next week with Assabet. So I might have some preliminary numbers as to where, you know, where they're at, because they have their October 1 commitments. And then they're usually earlier in the budget process, which is very helpful. But my understanding is they have increased head count quite a bit. So that assessment will go up as well. But I don't have that budget number yet. So that's the
It's
total.
from Maynard?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the total education costs, factoring that piece in, which is what we have to have the discussion about as well.
Yeah.
As that goes up, you know, it's coming from, it's got to come from
So
somewhere.
that was
as well.
part of the discussion too, because it was just a couple of days after the meeting that we had had, or a week or so after the meeting we had had. The discussion came up about the chart that had been put up at the FinCom meeting with the circle, and then the comment was made how that the school was going backwards, you know, every year, which it really is not, but, you know, whatever. And then one of the FinCom representatives pointed out that they intentionally pulled the vocational school out of that chart. So what they were looking at was pure Maynard education costs, not Maynard plus. So if you added that in, that number would go up. That's the way I understood it.
Right, that it was showing like Maynard education costs, not the costs of education in Maynard.
That's correct.
Just the district, yeah.
Just the district,
Right.
not including
Right.
out-of-town placement for,
Which had a 37% increase.
yes.
You know,
So,
And
you know,
to David's point too, and then similarly, the fact that, you know, what FinCom and I think David also pointed out was that the point mentioned earlier, that kind of embedded within some of the other blocks on that chart were pooled services that the school benefits from, but are coming out of the infrastructure pile of dollars, for example, so.
Yeah,
and,
the
you know,
accommodated costs.
it was, but to be fair, it was a
was a great
It was a
conversation.
nice conversation as far as the honesty and, you know, people willing to, you know, express concern and express frustration and what have you. But we've got a lot of work to do. And, you know, I guess we'll try to get there, but I don't know if we'll get there. But they can't say that right now that they don't know that we're a bit concerned.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be surprising, you know, the answer today, and it's not gonna change tomorrow, is 9.97 or 9.7 or 9 isn't gonna happen. It's just, it's never gonna happen. We just don't have that, you know, as we look at benefit costs increasing, you know, 10% potential health insurance costs increasing, liability and property insurance, you know, we're looking at a jump there, and as all these accommodated costs that we have to bear before, you know, and again, at the end of the day, we, you know, about $1 million in current available revenue without any other cuts. So to come in February and say, I can't believe we didn't get 9%, it's just, it's not sustainable and it's not practical. It's not going to be doable, which I think needs to be a reality, you know, today. Because it's not going to change, much like it, you know, it did in last year. We did what we could to help out, and get the budget, but, you know, just to see a 8-9% increase on a budget number like that, it's just, it's not doable.
Yeah, I think they know that, and I think the more frequently we can, expose, and I don't say that in a negative fashion, but expose the fact that what is being asked and claimed to be necessary, if that's why I think it's so important to have that 5-year plan, so that somebody looks at it and says, oh my God, we can't do this. So then there has to be a reassessment of how we approach things globally. Because of course, when you hear the conversation is, oh, well, we can't get there, then it's, well, we need an override. We need an override. And that's not the answer from my perspective, because what you do then is create a problem for next year. Because then they put that, that 9%, and then it's like, well, we're going to have to cut all of this stuff. How can we do that? We can't cut on the kids. And so that's not the answer.
I just have a question. I mean, I've only been here 4 years. Has anyone ever, not even questioned, do we know how they come up with their budget as a process?
I think Ken Esterbrook raised that at that first meeting that you were at when we had the joint one, stating
Yeah,
that.
it came up, it was afterwards, because what made me think about it is, I see everything, everybody's, all the pots are, and I look at, the number that they came up with, and and having worked with schools like in Boxborough and the region, and how their process and how they come up with, what they need, it seems quite different than what they do. And I didn't start thinking about it until, recently. Maybe I'll address it, afterwards, as to, specifically what I'm, going after.
Right. I think part of the discussion has been that perhaps they need to change their approach and work it from a different angle and, bring different people in, because whatever they're doing isn't working and isn't sustainable. Even if we could do the 9 point whatever this year out of a fluke, it's not going to be something that's maintainable going forward. And that's what was clearly stated to them last year, is that, we can help close this deficit just because the money had come in and shortened the gap. But going forward, you can't keep increasing. Level funding is hard enough. So there's got to be another option or we're in trouble as a town.
Agreed.
Because I see all the sources of revenue.
Right.
And everybody's side, and I have and I have questions as to, certain things, but I'll bring it up.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of alternatives for increased revenue sources.
Any other thoughts, as we?
No, but the conversation, the conversation's going to
Acton and
continue.
steal the other
but
half of Powder Mill Road.
it's just